it was announced that on Thursday evening that Pep Guardiola would be signing a 2-year extension at Man City. Does it come as a surprise then, do you think? And is there something that he knows that we don't know?
Well, I'm gutted. I want him to leave. If I'm honest. But, and listen, for the Premier League and the product, you want the best managers, the best players, and he certainly ticks that box. It did surprise me that he signed the 2-year extension. What that means, obviously, to the whole legal issue they've got going on, it doesn't really mean anything to me. I'm pretty sure these guys will have their own opinions. But the fact that he's staying at Manchester City for another 2 years tells me that they feel pretty confident that not a lot's going to happen in that period. But, I mean, again, if you talk about the manager, serial winner, the guy who knows exactly what he needs to get out from this side, the Manchester City side, will go again next season. Obsessed with football, which tells me he's probably already got targets in mind for next season. And it's almost a win for the Premier League, I think, because and also well for Pep. Where was he going to go that's better than Manchester City right now? I mean, absolutely everything at that football club is geared to what he wants to do and what he does really well. So that was always one I thought, would he go anywhere else? Because there's nowhere else for him, really. So, yeah, for the Premier League and for the product, I think it's good news for them.
Yeah, I think he offers them stability. So once he signs on that line, when they go approach players, they can talk about the manager being there. So he gives them stability. I personally, I want to beat Man City, and I want to beat Man City when he's there. I really do. It's not just about when he's there, you know. So I'm actually quite pleased he's staying, honestly. And it is, as Darren said, we talk about this league being the best league in the world. Well, he's the best manager in the world. So stay here, and hopefully it'll lift the standard of everybody else trying to chase him, and we can get past him and hopefully win.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points here. One is just on the legal side of it, which is I think it would be wrong to draw conclusions about the legal proceedings based on this. We know that Manchester City have... Well, people are going to do it. People are going to do it. But I think it'd be wrong only because City have unlimited resources, and I don't think they would be reluctant to throw a lot of money at Pep to create stability and a positive spin around what's happening at the club to just prevent people reading into the idea that rats are leaving the sinking ship, so to speak, right? So it could literally just be to put a positive face on it, and they don't mind spending the money to do that. So I'm not prepared to draw conclusions about the legal proceedings, only because I don't think anybody really knows where that's going. I think the other point, though, let's just take the other perspective for a second. Pep hasn't stayed long at clubs. That's not been what he's done traditionally. And they're not exactly playing their best football right now without Rodri. They probably have some refreshing to do. I don't think they necessarily bolstered their attack with the talent they needed in the summer. Pep is definitely the best manager in the game today and maybe one of the best managers of all time. But are we sure that he can go another cycle? Are we sure that he's going to find the answers continually? I think there's a presumption that he will always stay the best, but we've seen other managers, Jose Mourinho, for example, hit a moment where he just wasn't able to find the same magic with the same group. Sometimes the message starts to fall on deaf ears a little bit. So I hold out hope, and maybe it's silly hope, but I hold out hope that there may be a part of this with Pep staying longer than he traditionally has in other places where it could go a little stale, where maybe the ideas would be better off refreshed right now. So we'll see. I'm not convinced this means they'll just dominate for the foreseeable future.
So maybe for the players as well, because he's not quite demanding, he's very demanding. And after a while, maybe with some of the players, I'm not saying they wanted him to leave because they probably wouldn't because he is the best manager on the planet, but because he's so demanding and season upon season upon season as a player, can you lift yourself again? And like the fact he's had another 2 years, you're almost a bit like, okay, we've got to go again for another 2 years. So even from their perspective, I think they'd be delighted with it because, again, you put Pep at the top of that ladder, you almost feel like, right, they're the favourites again to go and win the next couple of Premier Leagues. But even the players, can they go again psychologically, mentally? Can they physically go again? The demands that he puts on you, because they go deep into every competition they're in. That's just Manchester City. So that's another aspect as well that we'll see what happens in the next couple of seasons.
So you guys were saying that Pep might lose his magic spark. Well,
I'm just saying he's washed. I just said he's washed. That's it. Pep is washed. You heard it here first. We break news on this show.
Meanwhile, Premier League clubs have approved changes to sponsorship rules. City had argued that no vote should take place on amendments to the APT rules. Here to explain everything is leading sports barrister at Church Court Chambers, Yazin Patel. Yazin, welcome to Inside Gooners. Can you explain what all of this means?
Very good afternoon to you. So this long-going saga around Manchester City, the Premier League, and their love-hate relationship has got another episode today where ultimately the Premier League brought forward potential changes which they wanted done following a tribunal back in October. In that tribunal, it was suggested and stated quite clearly that the rules in relation to associated party transactions regulations were breaching some of the aspects required in terms of UK competition law, also in terms of shareholder loans and other aspects of the regulations. What was stated by Manchester City at the time is these regulations now are not worth what they are on a piece of paper. Let's get rid of them and start again. Premier League decided, no, let's alter and change those parts of the regulations that are seen to be discriminatory or not lawful as a tribunal saw it. And so today's meeting was about changing one or two of those aspects.
Elliot, do you have a question? Because you actually used to be a lawyer.
Once upon a time, that doesn't reflect well on the American legal profession and industry in general. But yes, a couple of things. Firstly, just in terms of the change in the rules regarding owner loans having to be fair market value. As I understand it, Arsenal have some of the loans that now need to be reconsidered for PSR, and they could also be converted to equity as a way to avoid the PSR ramifications. So do you have maybe a little clarification about how this could impact Arsenal specifically?
You say you once were a lawyer, you still are a lawyer.
Well, I mean, I guess you're always a lawyer in some people's eyes, but not in the eyes of the bar in the United States.
So ultimately, in terms of shareholder loans, as you fully know, one of the ways that football clubs were trying to ensure that money is taken into clubs without them having to have large debts, let's say Manchester United, is to have shareholder loans where you have interest rates at a very low level. And one of the challenges was that in keeping with the APT regulations, or was it not? And low interest shareholder loans, it was decided back in October, should not be excluded from the rules. Now, why was this so important? Well, because of the PSR breaches and regulations of those breaches. We've seen what happened last year with a number of clubs and how they had penalties, points effectively deducted because of the fact they breached rules. And so by having these loans brought into the APTs and questioned as to whether they were with fair market values or not, what it was being suggested was those clubs that had loans at very small amounts would ultimately therefore be in breach if it was found that those loans were actually not at fair market value. So to put it another way, what Manchester City are saying is, wait a minute, on the one hand, you have these loans at very small interest rates, but the other hand, you have sponsorship deals, which you say could be inflated or above price. How is that fair competition, where you decide upon one being low interest rules, but that's allowed, but on the other where, say, a company linked to a large sheikh might think rather than 10 million, this club's sponsorship deal was worth 50 million. Well, that's up to them what it's worth or not. In the same way, it's up to an owner whether he wants the interest rates at 0.01% or 0.1%. And so that's where the two areas really in terms of conflict and breaches between the two really come in, where Manchester City are saying, no, these rules are unfair upon us and our kind of owners, and other clubs quite undoubtedly are saying, no, they are fair, because otherwise you'd be having large sponsorship deals. But in terms of interest rate rules, well, that should be allowed because it's owners effectively borrowing money to the club, but not wanting to rob the supporters and everyone else due to interest rates.
Can I ask just one more question then? Because obviously there was a tribunal ruling that basically said the APT rules need to be rewritten. City briefed everybody that this was a big win for them. I think this vote maybe puts the lie to that statement, but I would guess they're just going to run back to court and say the new rules are still invalid based on UK and EU competition law. So is this just going to be an endless cycle of litigation, or is the Premier League going to be able to defend these new APT rules as being within the regulations as outlined by the tribunal?
I would anticipate that we're going to be going further in terms of litigation. This is not going to end here. This is linked to the 130 breach charges, but more importantly, it's linked to what Manchester City and other clubs are saying, breaking the monopoly of the big clubs and their control. What they're suggesting ultimately is they should be allowed to decide what kind of sponsorship deals, how much should be allowed in, and what new money comes into the game, as opposed to the same clubs having the monopoly and control of the transfer markets and what value they have in terms of other clubs being sold, purchased, and also ultimately what other new money comes in, because PSR rules do control a great deal of really what money does come in. It's a way of controlling wages, way of controlling how much money comes into clubs. It's also really, if you want to be really cynical about this, a way of controlling who has the power at the top.
Thank you so much, Yazin, for joining us. We really appreciate it on Inside Gooners.